Do you like this red afghan? Believe it or not, I made it myself. All you need to know is how to knit a stitch and purl a stitch. My name is Aurele de Brosse, and I'm doing a program on Learn to Knit. What we're going to show you is how to cast on, how to knit a stitch, purl a stitch, and how to cast off. So let's get on with it. Let's learn to knit. You always wanted to learn to knit so you could make that beautiful sweater, or maybe an afghan, maybe just a plain scarf to start off with. So what we're going to do is learn to knit. The basic start in knitting is you have to learn the kind of yarn to use and the needles. In needles, you have all kinds of sizes, and there's all kinds of yarns in sizes. What we have to find out is when you choose a yarn, you have to know the type of yarn you've got, if it's pure wool or all acrylic, and what size needle that fits the yarn. Usually on the yarns, you'll find the symbols and it'll tell you what size needle to use. And it'll give you also how many stitches to a square inch or centimeters. So this is what we're going to learn, how to do a sample. Now, when you start your knitting, never start knitting from the yarn on the outside of the ball. What we have to do is go in the ball and find the center of the ball. Now, what I'm going to do is cast on. Cast on your knitting is the first row on your knitting. It's got to be very loose. What I'm going to do is show you 3 different methods. The first method is just the plain thumb method. First, we do a slip knot. A slip knot is just a plain knot that we slip through. This is our first knot we put on the needle. Now, put the yarn around the thumb and pick up that stitch. This is the first method. It's very easy, but there's a trick to it. If you're going to cast on this, you need to use a needle about 3 times the size that you would normally use for your pattern. So all you do is the wool around the thumb and you pick it up. Now, the other method I'm going to show you, you take a long piece of yarn, wool around the thumb again, do a slip knot. Now, put the yarn between your small finger and the second finger. Separate the yarn with your index and thumb. Put the needle around the wool from the thumb and pick up the yarn from your index finger and pull out. This is your first stitch. This is your best method of casting on. It's quick, easy, and when you're doing this, you cast on and you've knitted your first row. I will start again. Let's try that again. First you do a slip knot. Then the yarn in between the small finger and the second. Your index separate from your thumb. The wool around the thumb. Pick up the yarn from your index and pull back. It's quick, easy, simple, and it's very, very fast. You can cast on hundreds of stitches in a few seconds. Now, what I'm going to do is show you the third method, which takes 2 needles. Again, we start with a slip knot. Then, take your second needle, insert it into the stitch, wool around the needle, and take that stitch and slip it onto your needle. Enter your needle in the stitch, wool around, pick it up and slip it on. Pick up the stitch in the front, the wool around, and slip it on. Pick it, pick up your stitch, wool around, and slip it on. This is a hard method to do, but it is also used, and mainly in Europe. But I prefer just the simple method, the one needle method. Once you've acquired that, how to cast on, we will learn how to do just the plain knitting, or do a knit stitch. Here I've started, and we will do just a plain row of knitting. If you look at my sample, all the rows are knitted. You will see that there's a deep groove between the rows because it's all knitted. This is a very simple yarn, nice sized needle, a good yarn to do sweaters and things like that. So now, you've cast on a row, and now we're going to knit a row. You insert your needle in your first stitch, you put the wool around your small finger and over your index. The wool around the needle, and you pull the stitch on your second needle, and you slip the other stitch off from the previous stitch. Wool around, push the needle through, pick up the stitch, and slip the previous stitch off, which is the row below. The wool around, this is a knit stitch. Pick up your stitch, wool around, pick up, and pass it over. Wool over, wool around, pick up. This is a knit stitch. In your garments, there's only two stitches you need to know in knitting. Is a knit stitch and a purl stitch. So right now, this is what we're doing. We're doing a knit stitch. The wool around the needle, push it through, pick up your stitch, and slip the previous stitch from the row below off the needle. And that's your knit stitch. Now we're going to, instead of finishing that row, what I'll do is we're going to do a purl stitch. Once you finish your row in knitting, you turn the work around, and the purl, this is the wrong side of your work. When you're knitting, you're on the right side of your work. So this is the wrong side of the work. So now I'm going to purl. So you insert the needle towards you, you pick up your yarn, wool around finger, index, the wool in between the needles, and the needle goes through and pulls up the stitches from below and drop the other one. Insert the needle, wool in between, wool around, and go through. That's the purl stitch. Wool around, through, pull up the stitch, and drop the one previous row. Wool through, wool around the needle, and pull it through. This is the purl stitch. You'll do a knit row and a purl row. So now I'm doing the purl row. This is a purl stitch. It's the needle in the stitch towards you, wool in between, around, and you pull that stitch through. You have to make sure that the amount of stitches you got on your both needles, that you have the same amount of stitches at every row. Try not to increase stitches, because that's what will throw your work off. In the purl, go through, around, go through. Now again, the wool is around. The reason why you have to pull put your wool through your small finger is to keep a tension. Then the wool over your index, the wool around the needle, and pull through. That is the purl stitch. Now, what I'm going to show is how to do a knit one, purl one. Knit one and a purl one. We have here, this is what it looks like, a knit stitch and a purl stitch. The first stitch on my work is a knit stitch. So I put the needle into the stitch below, wool around, and you pull it through. To change from a knit stitch to a purl stitch, pass the wool between the two needles and bring it forward towards you. Insert your needle, wool around, or wool in between the needles, and now to go back to a knit stitch, pass the wool back on the other side from you and knit. To change again to a purl, bring it forward and a wool around. To a knit, wool forward, pick up your stitch, wool around the needle and pull it through. To a purl, bring the wool forward, pick up your stitch, wool between and go in between the needles. Wool again, this is a knit stitch, this is a purl stitch. So you're knitting and purling. This is to do all your ribbing on cuffs and things like that. So knit stitch, purl stitch, knit stitch, and a purl stitch. So now what I want to do is if the pattern asks for a knit to purl to. So I have here another sample, and this is what it looks like, a knit to purl to. Again, I'll explain that when you start knitting, you always start from inside the yarn, because the yarn at the manufacturer has a certain twist, which is twist clockwise. If you were to start the knitting from the ball on the outside of the yarn, when you're knitting, you untwist the yarn. So that will throw all your garments out of shape. So the best thing to do is to keep that special twist to the yarn. So you start from inside the yarn, the ball of yarn. Now, let's do a knit to purl to. I'm starting with a purl to. So the yarn, what I'm doing is grabbing the yarn around my finger, over the index, around, and push it through. Wool around, pull through. Bring the yarn back. Now I'm going to knit two. This is my first knit, and this is my second knit. To go back to a purl, bring the yarn over, wool around, bring it through, wool around, bring it through. Back to knit two, yarn forward, knit, my second knit. Bring in two, and my second one. With this simple pattern, if you want to do, in the winter time, you want to do a toque. Here's a nice pattern. All you have to do is cast on so many stitches. You measure around your head, cast on so many stitches to fit how many inches, then you knit to purl two. And then do the length you desire, and then you'll decrease the stitches. So we'll do that after. But now I'll show you again how to do a knit two, the yarn through, the yarn is around your small finger, over the index, around, and pull through. If I'm going to go to a purl, you bring the wool around your needle, in between the needle, and the wool around, in between the needles again, and do my second purl, and back to knit. So if you're doing, you want to do certain patterns. Here I have a scarf, which I did. First, I cast on so many stitches and knit 1, purl 1. Then, after an inch, I did 5 purl, 5 knit, 5 purl, 5 knit, and 5 purl. Then when you come back on your following row, you're purling. This is a knit, and if it would be the same side. What I was showing was how to do a knit 2, purl 2. Then when you finish the row, at the end of the row, now this is what I'm going to show you, how to turn around your work. So I'm doing a purl row right now. So in other words, the yarn through, around the needle, in between the needle, and pick up the stitch. The wool around, and I've got 3 stitches left. So the wool around, and then now I have 2, okay, and then this is my last purl stitch. Now, I'm turning the work around. Now I'm facing the jersey side of the knitting. It's the even side. This is the jersey, and this is what you would call the wrong side of your knitting. I'm looking at the right side, and my yarn is on my right. So in other words, I'm looking at the right side of my work, and now I'm going to knit. Insert the needle, picking up my yarn, wool around the needle, and slip the stitch below. So this is, I'm doing a knit row. Now that we've done quite a piece of work, you try to get a sample that's the right size. What you're trying to get is a 4 inch by 4 inch sample, or a 10 centimeter by 10 centimeter sample. So I have a ruler. I'll put it my first pin in the first stitch, then measure the distance. It's 4 inches or 10 centimeters, and put in my other pin right here, and then you count the stitches in between your pins. Also, you count how many rows that your sample. So again, and you try to follow what the company is asking you to have per inch or centimeters in your sample. Then, because the amount of stitches that the pattern is asking you to cast on, if your tension is either too tight or too loose, then your pattern is going to be out. So your sweater is going to be either too small or too large. So you need the right tension in your sample. That is very important to do. So when you buy a yarn, you try out the ball and you do a sample, and using the size of needle that is recommended for the yarn. Since we've knitted a row, purled a row, we knit and purl. Now, when you want to decrease your pattern, the decrease is either knit 2 together or a pass slip stitch over, a PSSO. Now, we're going to do a knit 2 together because I am on my jersey side of the pattern. So what you do is you pick up 2 stitches at a time on a knit stitch. You can either do that on a knit or you can do that on a purl. So picking up 2 stitches, this is a decrease. Knit 2 together, and I'll knit 2 together. You can, like I said, you can do that either on a knit side or the purl side. To knit 2 together, insert the needle, pick 2 stitches up, wool around the needle, 2 again. This is the decrease on a knit side. You do the same thing on the purl side. I'll finish this row, because knitting 2 together, you knit only half the amount of stitches, so it's pretty quick. Knit 2 together, and knit 2 together. I picked up another stitch below here. Cut that one out. So I finished my row. Now I'm turning around and I'm going to purl 2 together. Insert the needles towards you, roll around the finger, in between the needles, pick up your stitch, knit 2 together, purling 2 together, wool in between, wool, needle inside, wool around, and keep your stitch on the needle and pull it through. Wool around, pull it through. Purl 2 together. So you've decreased all the amount of stitches by 2. Turn around, and if I want to decrease again on the knit side, knit 2 together, all around, knit 2 together, my last stitch. Now we ended up with 2 stitches, and we're going to knit them. We'll put the needle inside, the wool around, and there. Ended up with 1 needle. And you break the yarn and slip it through, and that's it. You've decreased totally all the stitches down to 2 stitches. Now, we want to cast off our knitting. Cast off all the stitches all at the same time. So what we have to do is a pass slip stitch over, is a PSSO. So on the knit side, because this you can do either on the knit or on the purl side also. So insert your needle, do your first stitch. Now what you have to do is make sure that it's very loose. Do the next one. Now what you got to do is take the first stitch you knitted, pass it over the other stitch, the second stitch. Now you have 1 stitch. Knit the next stitch, you pass slip stitch over. Knit another one, all around, and pass it over. And knit, make sure it's very loose, over. And this is decreasing or finishing your garment. It's a cast off. Sometimes they'll say just cast off a certain amount of stitches at the beginning of a row. So you have to do a PSSO, pass slip stitch over. Very loose. Again. 1 more. Now, if I want to check my work, it's just perfect. Otherwise, if it's too tight, it will bunch up, and if it's too loose, it will be too much. So it has to be perfect. It would have to be the same amount as when you start. So up at the beginning or at the end, it's always the same. So what you have to do is make sure when you knit a stitch, my yarn around the finger, over, make sure you pull more yarn on your needle than normal, and pass slip stitch over the previous stitch over. Knit 1 more, very loose, pass the previous stitch over. Again. And we're going to do that to the end. This is casting off your garment. We have learned how to cast on, knit a row, purl a row, knit a stitch and purl a stitch. Also, we've learned the gauge, how to knit so many stitches for so many inches or centimeters. a nice little square. And if you use this blue yarn, you're using a 5.5 millimeter needle. If you're going to use a very fine yarn, you have to have more stitches in your gauge than, say, if I were to use a real thick wool. Using this yarn, I had to use a 7 millimeter, so you would have less stitches in your square. Now that you've learned the basic techniques in knitting, a little bit of practice and you'll be perfect. You'll be able to do a beautiful sweater like this. My name is Aurele de la Brosse. Keep your hands busy.
I have often said, yes, you can learn new skills from a book. However, with the Learn To series, you now have a practical, hands-on video that you can rewind, pause, and watch over and over again. Our family of programs is always growing, and I hope you'll join me in learning to knit, crochet, needlepoint, and many more crafts. Each video gives you a step-by-step instruction on how to create beautiful handmade treasures. Till next time, take care and keep your hands busy.